Exhausted leaders obviously don't lead well, no matter how many hours that they might put in. 3 is defining what matters outside of the school. One of the risks of headship is that identity becomes too closely tied to the role. It is who you are. Everything revolves around the school, every success, every challenge, every conversation. But sustainable leadership requires something more beyond that. Work-life balance in headship sounds good, but for most leaders it doesn't feel real, because this role doesn't switch off at 3:30. It follows you home, into the evening, and of course, for many, into the weekend. The question isn't how you balance it, it's how you live with it without losing yourself. Before we dive back in, I want to say something to head teachers listening. Attendance rarely improves through effort alone. It improves through clarity, discipline systems, and strong leadership alignment. Most leaders I speak with are working incredibly hard already. So if attendance still feels fragile in your setting, you can apply for the Senior Attendance and Leadership Review. It starts with a short strategic assessment. Eligible leaders are then invited to claim a fully funded strategic review process, typically valued at £1,000 for your school. This includes an on-site local visit, a detailed school-specific report, a follow-up strategy session, and a suite of practical leadership tools designed to help you move from reflective pressure to a clear and sustainable plan. If that would be useful in your context, you can apply now through the link in the show notes or by scanning the code on screen. And now, back to the episode. This is Headship After Hours. I'm Paul Collin, and I was told that I would never make headship after attending a challenging school myself. Now, with an NPQH and NPQEL, a Level 7 accredited coaching, and a Future Leaders alumni, with more than a decade in headship, I'm still leading. I've led some of the most complex schools in the UK, improving behaviour, stabilising attendance, rebuilding a culture, and restoring community trust back into our UK schools. I still work in schools, and I'm still supporting head teachers navigating difficult realities. I know what the weight really feels like. So, let's talk. Work-life balance is often presented as the goal. The idea that you can neatly separate work and life, that you can switch off completely, that you can create equal spaces for both. But in headship, that model rarely holds true, because this role is not just a job. It's a responsibility. It's a presence, a constant awareness. You carry the school with you as a head teacher, as a leader. A safeguarding concern that stays in your mind. A difficult staffing situation which is sitting with you in the evening. A decision you made during the day that will replay later on and maybe continue to do so. That's the reality of leadership at this level, and pretending otherwise can make leaders feel like they're getting it wrong. I remember early in headship trying to create strict boundaries, set times for doing things, clear cut-offs, rules around when I would and wouldn't engage with things like emails, meetings, calls. And while some of that helped, it never fully worked for me. Because the role does not operate in these sort of clean lines. So the shift for me was this. I stopped chasing that balance and started focusing on sustainability. Sustainability looks different. It's not about equal time. It's about sustainable energy, sustainable ways of thinking, and of course, from an out product to that thinking, sustainable leadership. There are 3 shifts that helped me move forward with that in mind. The first was integration over separation. Instead of trying to divide work and life completely, I accepted that they would overlap. I became more intentional about how. There are times when work requires full attention, and there are times when presence at home matters more. Not perfectly balanced, but consciously chosen. That shift removes guilt, because you're not failing at balance. You're making deliberate decisions. Number 2, protecting energy, not just time. As we discussed in previous episodes, energy is the real currency of leadership. So instead of asking, how much time am I working? The question became, and for many should become, how am I managing my energy across the week? Where do I need to recover? Where do I need space? And where do I need to step back to remain effective? Because exhausted leaders obviously don't lead well, no matter how many hours that they might put in. 3 is defining what matters outside of the school. One of the risks of headship is that identity becomes too closely tied to the role. It is who you are. Everything revolves around the school, every success, every challenge, every conversation. But sustainable leadership requires something more beyond that. Family, interests, time that is not connected to the school. Not as an escape, but as a way of maintaining perspective. There's something else that is definitely worth reflecting on here. Head teachers often feel guilty. Guilty when they maybe leave early. Guilty when they switch off. Guilty when they prioritise something outside of the school. And that guilt is not a useful leadership tool. In fact, it drains energy without adding value. What matters is clarity, knowing when you need to be fully present at work and knowing when you need to step back to sustain yourself. The strongest leaders I've worked with are not the ones who are always available. They're the ones who are consistently effective, and effectiveness comes from that sustainability, not constant availability for all things. Now, it doesn't mean the role becomes easy. It obviously is a very challenging role. There will be, of course, intense weeks, challenging periods, moments where the balance feels completely kind of off. But over time, sustainable leaders learn how to recalibrate, to recognise when they're stretched, and to respond before it becomes a form of burnout. So if you're reflecting on your own leadership right now, ask yourself this: am I chasing balance or building sustainability? Am I measuring hours or managing energy? And am I trying to separate everything or learning how to live within the reality of the role? Because headship is demanding, but it should not take over everything and become just the only thing that you are. The goal is not perfect balance, it's sustainable leadership. If something in this episode has resonated, well, sit with it for a moment. Leadership is not meant to be carried in silence. If this conversation helped you think differently, well, that matters. If today's conversation resonated and attendance remains a pressure point in your school context, you can apply for the Senior Attendance and Leadership Review. It begins with a short strategic assessment. Eligible leaders are then invited to claim a fully funded review process typically valued at £1,000, including an on-site school visit, a detailed report and practical tools to support a clear 90-day plan. If that would be useful in your context, you can apply now using the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening and stay connected.